Hello there, and welcome to our Wheel and Anchor webinar about our upcoming LiveAway trip to Australia. This is an incredible adventure, a great way to see this amazing country. Whether you're just seeking to get away for a few weeks in winter or immerse yourself in all that Australia has to offer, this trip offers a perfect blend of relaxation, adventure, and learning all about the local culture. Now, for those of you who participate in many of our Wheel and Anchor webinars, you are welcome to jump ahead to the nitty gritty, to all the details of this program. And you can find the chapters by scrolling down in the description below this video. You can jump ahead to the map and the day by day itinerary. If you're new to Wheel and Anchor, on the other hand, I encourage you to listen in as I explain a little bit about what our community is all about. At Wheel and Anchor, we're more than just a travel company. We're a community of like minded Canadian explorers. And the one thing that we all have in common is our desire to seek out experiences that go beyond the traditional tourist tracks. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with visiting the popular tourist destinations. They're obviously popular for a reason. But we look to create experiences that combine the most important touristic highlights with elements that are a little bit lesser known, and also allowing for plenty of free time, which means you can go out and discover on your own. More importantly, though, is the camaraderie that comes from traveling with fellow Canadians and friends who share the same love for adventure, culture, and exploration. If you value that sense of connection, the opportunity to share experiences, and the freedom to explore at your own pace, then you've definitely come to the right place. At Wheel and Anchor, we have two goals for our members: to be both well traveled and well connected. And when we talk about being well traveled, we don't mean ticking off destinations off a bucket list, but having one is certainly fun. And for most travelers, there's always a list of places that you'd love to visit. But what we mean is that we want you to stay curious, adventurous, and open to shifting your perspective as you explore new places with us. This is how travel has the power to change the way we see the world. At the same time, being well connected is equally important for us. It's about forging friendships that last long after the trip ends. It's also about building a community of fellow travel enthusiasts who share stories, tips, and dreams for future adventures together. Throughout this trip, you'll have plenty of opportunities to connect not just with fellow travelers, but with also with the local culture and the amazing people of Australia. One more thing I'd like to do before we delve into the details about our live-away trip in Australia is to introduce myself and our team. My name is Gordon Dreger. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor, and I've been working in and around travel and bringing Canadians all around the world for well over 30 years. I couldn't do all of this alone. None of it would be possible without a dedication of a great team of people. But the person who's most important to you is our lead trip specialist, Paula Zarnick. She's the person who will reach out when you would like to get your questions answered about this trip, or perhaps get all the paperwork to join us on this or one of our other great adventures. Our plan for this webinar is pretty straightforward. I'm going to be your virtual guide. I'm going to take you on a little journey around Australia, the places that we've included on this liveaway, and you'll get a bit of a sense of what to expect on each day of the program. We're going to start off with a geographical overview. I'll show you the map of where we're headed, and then we'll jump into the day-by-day itinerary. First of all, a little geography lesson about Australia. It's obviously a vast country in the southern hemisphere, bordered by the Indian Ocean to the west, the Pacific Ocean obviously on the east, and the Southern Ocean that separates it from Antarctica down to the south. And as you probably well know, even though Australia is about three-quarters the size of Canada, much of it is uninhabited, the hot, dry desert that comprises most of the middle of the continent. The population lives, for the most part, on the coast, in particular the east and south coasts, which are the main stops on our trip. We're going to begin in Melbourne, which is in the southeastern corner of the country. It's known for its rich history, its creative culture, and its incredible food scene. Over the course of a week, we'll immerse ourselves in the laneways of the city. We'll take a tram ride up to St. Kilda, and explore natural wonders like the 12 Apostles along the coast. We'll then head down to the island of Tasmania. This is where we'll spend another week in the capital of Hobart. Tasmania is also home to incredible natural beauty and historical sites like Port Arthur, which is the site of the former penal colony, which Australia is so well known for. Here, we'll also get up close with Tasmania's unique wildlife, including wombats, the Tasmanian devil, Echinidas, and the Bonderong Sanctuary. From Tasmania, we'll fly up to Sydney, Australia's largest city, and we'll spend a week here visiting, of course, the iconic Opera House and Harbour Bridge. We'll venture out into the Blue Mountains to admire the Three Sisters rock formation and cruise around its iconic harbour. We then have, after our 3 weeks touring Melbourne, Tasmania, and Sydney, a post extension trip which will take us up to the Great Barrier Reef, in particular Port Douglas in North Queensland. This tropical paradise is your gateway to not only the reef, but also the ancient Daintree rainforest. So, this trip offers everything from cosmopolitan cities to pristine beaches, as well as a deep dive into Australia's cultural wonders and natural beauty. Let's now dive into the day by day details of our 22-day itinerary for this live away in Australia. We're going to begin our adventure in Melbourne. Now, no matter how you shake it, it's a long journey from Canada. So you'll probably be making a flight with at least one, if not two stops, depending on where it is in Canada that you're flying from. Once you land at Melbourne Airport, we're going to pick you up in our private transfer and bring you downtown to the heart of the city. It's about a 30-minute drive, maybe a little longer, depending on the time of day. And when you get into Melbourne, you'll be quite amazed because it will be reminiscent of cities back in Canada. Melbourne was founded back in 1835, and it quickly blossomed into one of Australia's most vibrant cities because of the 19th century Victorian gold rush. Today, the city is known for a rich cultural history, which blends contemporary art and diverse culinary delights. The food is the part that I perhaps like about the city the most, but the city's commitment to urban planning and green spaces makes it a very inviting place to spend a week. The public transportation system is really remarkable. In fact, the whole downtown core can be traveled without for free using the local tram system. Once you look beneath the surface of this city, though, you'll find all the ways that it is a world-class place all of its own. As I said, it is a food lover's paradise. There's trendy cafes, multicultural eateries, and all kinds of fine dining restaurants on top of that. The city is famous for its arts and culture scene with some world-class museums and galleries, some of them featuring Aboriginal artwork. But if you're a coffee lover, Melbourne is a dream come true with baristas serving some of the best coffee in the world. The rooms we have included for you at the Citadines are our executive rooms, which are on the 17th to the 25th floors. They have floor to ceiling windows and have amazing views of the skyline of the city. We also have the opportunity for you to upgrade to a one-bedroom studio, which offers quite a bit more space and also has a kitchenette so that you can warm up a few things or do a little bit of cooking during your stay in Melbourne. As we always do on our first full day in a new city, we're going to take you on a little orientation walk to show you around the neighborhood. It's going to be a casual little stroll around, and we're going to point out some of the more important spots, like where are the nearest bus stops or how the tram system works, which, as I mentioned before, is free in the central part of Melbourne. Where are the supermarkets, the laundromats, and some of the best cafes and dining spots in the immediate vicinity. This is a great way for you to make sure you feel at home so you can make the most of your week-long stay in Melbourne. Once we've covered all the basics, you'll have the rest of the day to explore on your own. You might want to hop on that tram just to ride around the city a little bit or venture out to some of the different neighborhoods. And one of the neat things about the city is that it has several neighborhoods that share names with places back home in Canada, like Kingston, Richmond, Carlton, and Collingwood. It'll almost make you feel like you're at home, and it's so easy to get around that you'll have no shortage of places to explore. What better thing to do on our next day than to head out a little bit outside of town and get some amazing views over the city itself? This excursion is full of delightful little surprises. We'll take a train, we'll have some tea, and again, we'll have those amazing views over the city. Our adventure begins as we travel through the eastern suburbs of Belgrave, a leafy green part of the city, and we'll hop aboard the Puffing Billy, which is a vintage narrow gauge steam train, which chugs its way through lush mountain rainforests and up into the so-called Dandenong Ranges. After this ride, we'll stop for a morning tea in a quaint little spot that we've picked out, and then we'll continue our journey through the townships of the Dandenongs. For lunch, we have a lovely spot where, again, tea takes center stage. Shelves are filled with varieties, thousands of varieties of tea, along with all the different paraphernalia that you might ever not never thought that you would need. In the afternoon, we'll head to the Mount Dandenong and Observatory itself, and this is where we'll get some great views over the city. After taking in these stunning vistas, we'll head back to Melbourne via the so-called Brighton bathing boxes. These little painted beach huts have become an iconic photo stop and are one of the most Instagram spots in the whole city. You now have the first of several days on this trip to explore on your own, or of course, you can join a Melbourne food tour. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The culinary scene in Melbourne is truly amazing. And we've put this all together in a food tour that allow you to take a deeper dive to find out what that's all about. This city is considered the food capital of the whole country, and the city literally lives and breathes its food scene. Every street and alley and hidden corner seems to offer something worth tasting. On this tour, we're going to get a local expert who is going to guide us through some of the best spots in town, from some indigenous owned restaurants which serve first generation Australian dishes like kangaroo tartare to trendy cafes featuring some world class coffee. There'll be also some delicious surprises along the way, like Venetian tapas in a little Italian enclave and a family run shop where cheese and chocolate are paired in some very unexpected ways. We'll also, of course, do our first of what will undoubtedly be some Australian wine tastings. And we'll stop in as well at Chinatown for a secret dish. And we'll finish the whole thing off with a special Greek dessert in a rooftop bar that you probably wouldn't otherwise have found on your own. We're going to gather again of our whole group together and head out on a full day excursion to one of the most iconic natural wonders in this part of Australia. This is going to be a long day. It's going to take about 10 hours in total. Remember, it's a big country, but we're going to see some breathtaking coastlines, some dramatic rock formations, and hear some great stories along the way. And our first stop is going to be the 12 Apostles, which is a group of towering limestone stacks that rise majestically out of the Southern Ocean. But that's just the start. We're also going to visit the Lochard Gorge, where stories of shipwrecks and survival abound. At Gibson Steps, we'll take a walk right down to the beach and get an up close view of the cliffs. We'll also see London Bridge, which, as you might guess, actually did fall down back in 1990, and it left two tourists stranded on a new island. But luckily, they were rescued safely by helicopter. We'll explore the grotto, the arch, which will add some even more spectacular rock formations to our collection. We'll have a lovely seaside lunch in the village of Port Campbell. You'll feel like you've stepped into a postcard, and then we'll make our way back to Melbourne via the Otway Harvest Trail. We'll have a chance to taste some local artisanal treats like cheese, chocolate, and even some small batch gin, depending on what's available on that particular day. As we head back to the city, passing through these rolling hills and dairy farms, you'll have time to reflect on all of these amazing wonders that this region is so well known for. You'll have dinner on your own tonight, but be sure to pack along a jacket because the weather along the coast can be quite unpredictable. So we're going to want to be prepared for just about anything. We then have a day that's completely free at leisure. Now, sometimes a bunch of our members will get together and find something to do collectively, as you can see from this photo from one of our past trips. But one way or the other, you should take a little time to research Melbourne and the kind of things that might interest you, because this is the part where this travel, this sense of adventure really comes alive. You might want to visit the Queen Victoria Market, which is an institution in Melbourne. It's a historic market. It's a great place to explore a local market with fresh produce, local delicacies, and all kinds of unique souvenirs. I find markets are a great way to get a feel for a city. There's also street art in so-called Hosier Lane and AC/DC Lane, which have this constantly changing canvas of murals, stencils, and paste ups, which tell the story of the fantastic artistic and rebellious spirit of Melbourne. There's, of course, Federation Square and Flinders Street Station, the main transport hub for the city, both in and of themselves iconic landmarks that are across from each other in the heart of the city. The Federation Square has quite a modern design, and the Street Station, on the other hand, is quite a classic example of 19th century architecture. There's also the opportunity to visit the South Bank and the Yarra River Walk, which is a beautiful stroll along the riverside. There's cafes, shops, great opportunities to people watch or maybe even meet a few local Melbourners along the way. But if you want to do something completely different, you might want to take the Sunset Penguin Cruise down at St. Kilda Breakwater, where you can watch penguins heading back to their nests at sunset. It's one of the few places in the world outside of Antarctica where you can see these amazing seabirds in the wild. On our last full day in Melbourne, you'll have the chance to either enjoy it at your own leisure or join us on an optional cruise down to Williamstown. This little optional side trip will start off with a leisurely stroll down the Yarra River, which goes right through the middle of the city. This used to be a very bustling waterway, which played a key role in the early settlement of the city. And as we walk, we'll get a sense of the city's maritime past, which is now juxtaposed with modern bars and restaurants at an area called Southgate. There, we'll embark on a scenic boat cruise along the river and across Hobson's Bay to Williamstown, which once rivaled Melbourne in its bid to become the capital of the province of Victoria. As we wander around the streets, we'll be transported back in time amongst the majestic old buildings and some significant landmarks like the preserved historic morgue and the iconic Time Ball Tower at Point Gellibrand, which is one of the only one of five remaining in the world. If you're a history buff, you'll love the Seaworks Maritime Museum, which shows all about its maritime heritage from the early explorers to the working class life of the dock workers. It's a fascinating look into the city's waterfront, where survival and not leisure was once the focus. We'll have lunch and dinner at leisure today, which will give you the opportunity to explore a little bit more of the historic town or return to Melbourne to enjoy your last hours before we head off to Tasmania the following morning. We'll check out from Melbourne and make our way for a short 1 hour and 15-minute hop down to Hobart, Tasmania. We'll likely be in by early afternoon, so we'll check in or at least drop our luggage at the hotel and have a short walking tour with our local guide. And again, an orientation that will get you oriented to find out where all those key amenities are, just like we did in Melbourne. You'll have lunch and dinner at leisure today, and we'll be pointing you out some of the spots that our members love from previous trips or that our local guide suggests that you might enjoy. Hobart is the second oldest capital in Australia, and it's located right at the mouth of the Derwent River. It was once a hub for whalers and traders, but the city has evolved into a vibrant cultural destination while still retaining some of its maritime charm. The historic waterfront area is now home to galleries, shops, and eateries that have all been housed in repurposed Georgian era warehouses. Highlight is Salamanca Place, where you'll find a lively and bustling art scene, as well as the famous Saturday market. For those seeking adventure, Kunani Mount Wellington rises above the city in the background. It has sweeping views and wonderful alpine trails. So, a hint for those who are a little bit more active for things to do on one of the free days. There's also a world renowned food scene here in Hobart, something that a lot of people don't know, but it has fresh seafood, of course, local produce, and cool climate wines. We'll check out the Farmgate Market for some fresh Tasmanian specialties, or enjoy some of the waterfront restaurants to indulge in dishes like freshly shucked oysters or slow-cooked Tasmanian lamb. Delicious. Another thing that you might want to do while you're here for the week is visit the Museum of Old and New Art Mona, which is perhaps what the city is most known for, but it's an iconic and provocative museum that is an absolute must for art lovers. We're going to be staying at the Quest Savoy, which is a perfect base for exploring the central part of Hobart, as well as the attractions in the surrounding area. It's only 400 meters away from the harbor and has easy access to lots of cafes, restaurants, and other options. In fact, across the street, you'll find the Elizabeth Street Mall, and not far away is the bus hub, which gives transit options to go to other areas around Tasmania. The rooms that we've got for you are our Superior Studios, which at 35 square meters are a little larger than your average hotel room, so they're quite comfy. They have an open plan design with a big, huge bed, a fully equipped kitchenette, as well as of course as an ensuite bathroom. There's a TV and a desk and great Wi-Fi access, so it's a good choice. Both in terms of location as well as the amenities of the hotel for our week-long stay here in Hobart. We're going to take you right out on our first full day in Tasmania to explore a national park as well as a wonderful wildlife sanctuary. We'll start out by driving through the picturesque Derwent Valley, which has rolling farmlands and forested hills that feel a completely different world compared to the city of Hobart. Our destination will be the Mount Field National Park, which has towering eucalyptus trees and prehistoric looking ferns. The crown jewel of it all are the Russell Falls. It's a tiered waterfall, which is one of Tasmania's most accessible and stunning of its kind. The walk to the falls is short and easy, and we'll stroll through a temperate rainforest on the way, keeping an eye out for glowworms, which hide in the undergrowth. And if we're really lucky, maybe we'll see a little wombat waddling by. We'll have a light lunch in a little cafe in the park and then head back to Hobart. But we're going to stop at the Bonarong Wildlife Sanctuary, which is home to some of the rarest and most endangered species in Tasmania. We'll see, and this, of course, is a highlight for most people, particularly Bugs Bunny fans, the Tasmanian devil, in addition to quolls, wallabies, betongs, and echinidas. I can never pronounce these things right. Some of these species don't exist anywhere else in the world. Now, it's not a zoo, but it's actually a refuge that's focused on the rescue and rehabilitation of these different animal species. If we're lucky, we might even get a chance to feed by hand some of the friendlier residents, which is truly an unforgettable experience. I know that our last group had the opportunity to do that, and that's something you certainly won't soon forget. So, as always, we'll have the first of our free days here in Hobart. And this, again, is where I would encourage you, if you're interested in joining us, to do a little research on the things that you might want to see and do in this fascinating town. We will, however, offer an excursion for those interested in a little bit of the historical side of the city. And we're going to take in the Salamanca Story Walk, which is a 2 hour walking tour that takes you back to the colonial days of Hobart, which is a time when whalers drank in the pubs and the convicts fought in the streets. The tour will take us through Battery Point, where the Georgian and Victorian era cottages tell the story of its working class past. You'll hear all the tales of the hardship and survival of the convicts who had shaped the early part of Tasmania's settlement. We'll also stroll through Salamanca Place, where we'll pass the sandstone warehouses that once stored whale oil and all the goods that arrived in by sea, which of course was the only way of transport back in the day. Today, there's galleries and cafes and shops, which add a bit of a modern twist to this historic part of the town. Along the way, we'll hear about more about the fascinating history of Tasmania and how it evolved from a rough colonial town to the modern city it's known as being today. Today's included excursion will take us on a full day trip out to Port Arthur, which is one of the most intact and evocative of Australia's convict sites. We're going to drive out to the incredibly scenic Tasman Peninsula, which was a World Heritage listed settlement that provides a truly poignant glimpse into Tasmania's past. Port Arthur was, in fact, one of the strictest penal institutions in the British Empire. It housed repeat offenders under incredibly harsh conditions in the early part of the 19th century. The prisoners were subjected to severe discipline, hard labor, and solitary confinement with the aim of reforming them. Today, the site is a well preserved testament to all that history with its penitentiary, the chapel, the hospital, and the solitary cells, which offer a stark view of the lives led by the early settlers. Port Arthur is part of the Australian Convict Sites World Heritage listing, which highlights the impact that forced labor had on Australia's early economy, infrastructure, and society. We'll then head out on a short harbor cruise that will take us to the Isle of the Dead, where both the convicts and free settlers were buried, and as well, we'll stop at Point Poor, which is the site of the English colony's first boys' prison. These boys were sometimes as young as 9 years old, and although they were subjected to a different penal system, it was still under incredibly harsh conditions. Beyond all this historical significance, as I said, the Tasman Peninsula itself has some breathtaking natural beauty. We'll travel along the coast, passing Eagle Hawk Neck, which is once a heavily guarded checkpoint, as well as some dramatic rock formations like the Tasman's Arch and Devil's Kitchen, which have been shaped over centuries of erosion. A free day for all in Hobart. And if it hasn't intrigued you enough so far, I encourage you to do a little bit of online research about some of the things that you might get up to. Among the things you might get up to are a visit to Mona. I talked about this before, the Museum of Old and New Art, which is anything but a typical museum. It's actually an eccentric art experience that mixes both bizarre and brilliant inside an underground labyrinth. It's an adventure in and of itself, and even the ferry ride getting there is part of the fun because of the sheep-shaped seats as well as the onboard bars. You might also take a sail on a two-masted wooden tall ship, the SSV Rona H, which goes out of Kings Pier Marina. You can even learn to sail along the way or just sit back and enjoy a little bit of the maritime history as the wind takes you across the water. If you were in a hurry to get across the bay to visit spots like Bellarive or the Mona, you might take a high-speed ferry ride. There's also the possibility to visit the Cascades Female Factory, which is where we'll learn about the history of convict women, where many were incarcerated back in the days. From there, we can head over to Cascade Brewery, the oldest brewery in Tasmania, with some refreshing local beer that is made from pure mountain water. Hobart, of course, is known for its excellent seafood. You can dine along the waterfront at a place like Muir's, or enjoy the historic charm of the Drunken Admiral, or have some great fish and chips at the Fish Frenzy, all while taking in a view overlooking the water. And finally, as I also said at the beginning, you might want to visit Mount Wellington, or Kunanyi, which has some breathtaking views of Hobart and the surrounding countryside. You can drive or hike up Mount Wellington. The Oregon Pipes track is a great challenge for those looking for a little more active excursion, but of course the weather can be quite unpredictable, so you need to make sure to prepare accordingly. Our included excursion today will take us out to Bruny Island. This is a natural paradise which is just across the D'Entrecasteaux Channel from Hobart. It's only a short ferry ride away, but it is like a world unto itself, which has towering sea cliffs, pristine beaches, and dramatic coastal vistas that showcase some of the rugged beauty of Tasmania. For wildlife enthusiasts, we'll be in for a treat because here we'll get to see fairy penguins, albatross if we're lucky, as well as the rare white Bennett's wallaby. You can see a picture of him here, which is a unique genetic variant in this region. The journey will start from Kettering, which is about 33 kilometers south of the city itself, and the crossing takes only 15 minutes. We'll head straight to the southernmost point of the island to get a sense of the striking coastline. But it's not just about the stunning views. Here, too, you have a foodie's paradise. The island's local whiskey, wine, and fudge perfectly complement its famous seafood. A highlight of the day will be visiting a place called Get Shucked, which is a local oyster farm where we'll sample some sustainably farmed plump oysters, which are harvested directly from the waters surrounding. At lunch, we'll have an island tasting platter, which will consist of a local hot smoked salmon, house-cured wallaby. You've probably never eaten wallaby before. Some cheese, chorizo, olives, as well as some homemade Pinot cherry chutney. Ooh, delicious. It's an incredible way to experience a bit of the unique culinary delights of the island. After a whole day of exploration, we're going to head back on the ferry to Hobart, and you'll have dinner on your own, although at this point, probably a snack will suffice at best. Once again, you can use this day to explore some of Hobart's or Tasmania's attractions, as I mentioned in a little bit earlier, or you can join us for an optional experience to the Coal Valley. It's here that you can see some of your fellow members enjoying this renowned wine growing area in the southern part of Tasmania. We'll head out just before noon and go across the Tasman Bridge, which will take us into this picturesque wine region, which is known for its cool climate and fertile soils. The Coal Valley has been producing wine since back in the 19th century, but it only came into its own in the last 100 years or so. A new wave of winemakers came in and they started to experiment with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which can grow here because of the unique terroir and the maritime influences. It has a long growing season, which means wines of incredible depth and character. We're going to visit the top or four of the top cellar doors where we'll sample between four and each eight wines at each stop. So you'll want to be prepared for that. And we'll really get a sense of the rich winemaking history of Tasmania. How many wines from Tasmania have you tasted before? Probably not a lot. We'll have a sampling of cheese as well while we're tasting the wine, and even do a wine and chocolate pairing. Some of the vineyards that we will visit include Cooley Wines, Frogmore Creek, Puddle Duck Vineyard, and the Coal Valley Vineyard, which each of which takes in a unique and distinctive take on the flavors of the region. We'll say goodbye to Tasmania and hop on an hour and a half flight, which will take us up to Australia's biggest city, Sydney. We're going to be staying right in the heart of Sydney within walking distance to its major attractions, like, of course, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, as well as the Opera House. Sydney is really quite a vibrant metropolis, and the history is fascinating. It goes all the way back thousands of years to the time of the Indigenous Australian people, which, of course, we're going to learn about throughout the course of our trip. European settlement only happened here in 1788, and of course, Sydney is now the cultural and economic hub of Australia. It's got a spectacular harbor, incredible beaches, and really quite a diverse and multicultural atmosphere. You can easily spend a day out visiting famous beaches like Bondi Beach and Manly Beach. You may have heard of them before. You can walk along the cliffs between Bondi and along the Coogee Path. But at the same time, there's lots to see right in downtown. The streets of Paddington, the Vietnamese part of town known as Cabramatta. There's all kinds to explore. And when we arrive, we'll have an orientation tour that'll give you a sense of how to use Sydney's public transportation and all the things that you can see on foot. In Sydney, we're going to be staying at the Grace Hotel, which is right in the heart of the city. It is one of the most prominent historical landmarks, and was built back by the Grace brothers in the 1920s. They were successful retailers in their heyday, and in the meantime, the hotel has been taken over and beautifully restored. It's got neo-Gothic architecture on the outside, while on the inside you have this Art Deco design, which makes for a very striking blend of old world charm, but at the same time offering modern amenities as you could expect from a hotel like this. The rooms that we have set aside for our trip are their so-called signature superiors, which feature either a king or twin beds. They're quite oversized as far as hotel rooms go, 30 to 35 square meters. And I would describe them as sort of elegant minimalism, a very lovely, welcoming atmosphere. Now, these rooms don't have kitchenette facilities as with the other accommodations at our previous two stops. They do have a mini bar and tea and coffee making facilities. But given the prime location downtown, there's lots of places to get a snack or a drink nearby. On our first full day in Sydney, we'll head out on an excursion that'll take the better part of the day. We'll start off by taking a look into the city's rich colonial architecture, and we'll stop at some significant government buildings that date back to the early days of the city. We'll then head off to explore some of the many beautiful green spaces around the city, including Hyde Park, the Royal Botanic Gardens, as well as Mrs. McCary's Point, where you'll enjoy some stunning views of the harbor. We'll then head over and take a look at some of Sydney's famous beaches, ones like Bondi and Manly, where you can get a sight of the golden sands and the surf rolling in, and you'll understand why the quality of life in Sydney is so high. We'll head up to North Head, where we'll stop to enjoy some incredible coastal views as the cliffs drop right into the ocean and they offer a panorama of nothing but sea and sky. As we explore through the city's diverse neighborhoods, you'll find a blend of culture and history. Some of the streets still feature the 19th century terrace houses, while others have lively markets, restaurant, and old pubs that have witnessed Sydney's transformation over the years. There'll be plenty of photo opportunities throughout the day from some of the best vantage points of all. You'll then have an opportunity to enjoy Sydney at your own pace or to join us on a walking tour to the rocks. Now, the rocks are actually not geological rocks per se. It's, in fact, Sydney's oldest district where the story of the city really began. We'll start out with some views of the harbor before heading into the first European settlement at a place called Cadman's Cottage. Here, you'll find one of the last remaining buildings that dates back from the early part of the 19th century. We'll walk around on cobbled streets. We'll hear stories of the rich history, including the arrival of the first fleet in 1788 and some 20 years later, the Rum Rebellion, and the transformation of the area during the reign of Governor Lachlan Macquarie in the 1810, excuse me, where Sydney shifted from being a penal outpost into a functioning town. We'll stop in at Campbell's Cove and Foundation Park. This will give us a bit more of a glimpse into the working class life in the early 19th century, and also Nurses Walk and the Argyle Cut, which will give us another glimpse into the challenges of life in the early days of the city. It has a fascinating history of survival. The Rocks was almost demolished in the 1970s, but thanks to a movement known as the Green Bands, unionists fought to preserve the distinct sandstone buildings and the rich heritage of the area. We'll gather as a group together and head out to one of Sydney Sider's favorite weekend spots, the Blue Mountains. Now, for those of us from Ontario, Canada, we think about something different when we hear the term Blue Mountains. In Australia, this region got its name because of this interesting optical effect, which is called the Rayleigh scattering. It's a combination of a fine mist with eucalyptus particles in the air that scatter short wavelengths of light, particularly blue and violet, and they create a magical blue hue that envelop this whole landscape. And the effect is particularly noticeable in the valleys and gorges, which give this region of the Blue Mountains an ethereal beauty and make it such an iconic destination. We'll stop in at Three Sisters, which is a famous rock formation overlooking the Jameson Valley. Here we'll find some towering rocks that were spiritual and cultural landmarks from the original occupants of the area. We'll walk through the Wentworth Falls National Park, where the water cascades down this amazing cliff face, and we'll stop in at various lookouts where we'll get some truly amazing vistas of the tranquil waterfalls and the valley itself. We'll then head into Megalong Valley, which is an incredible rainforest surrounded by farmland. We'll have a little wine tasting. Some more of Australia's iconic wines, all with some beautiful views of the surrounding landscape. Before we head out of the area, we'll make one other stop in at Govetts Leap, which is one of Australia's most famous lookouts, which has, again, incredible views of the sandstone escarpments, the sheer cliff walls, and the canyons of the Gros Valley. There's another whole day to explore Sydney at your leisure, or alternatively, join this interesting excursion we've put together called Cooking for a Cause. We came across this experience on one of our previous trips and found that it's not only interesting, but it actually makes a difference. We're going to visit Oz Harvest, which is Australia's leading food rescue organization that started back in the early 2000s. It was a single van that was dedicated to taking surplus food and delivering it to local charities. What a great idea. Today, it operates all over the country, tackles food waste, hunger, and sustainability. Their mission actually aligns with all five of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, making a chance to contribute to a great cause while learning valuable skills. In fact, I would love to see something like this put into place back home. We'll have a hands-on session where we'll join the organization chefs to learn zero waste cooking techniques, which transform rescued ingredients into gourmet meals for vulnerable communities. We'll learn everything from the basics about how to chop an onion, and there is an art to it, as well as how to cook root to stem, making sure that no part of any ingredient goes to waste. Not only is it a chance to learn some practical cooking skills, but you'll also gain some insight into food sustainability and the impact of food waste. After preparing and cooking up some delicious and nutritious meals, we'll help pack them up for delivery to local charities. The best part of all, we don't have to wash up. We just get to taste the meals that we've created. We'll have the better part of the day to explore a bit of Sydney at our leisure before gathering together for a special farewell evening. That afternoon, we will gather as a group and board our private yacht for a little 3 hour Sydney Harbor cruise, which is the highlight of any visit to this city. It offers, of course, breathtaking views of the most iconic landmarks like the Sydney Harbor Bridge and, of course, the Opera House, as well as some of the beautiful bays and hidden coves that make the harbor so famous. We'll have plenty of space to relax because we've got the whole boat to ourselves, and the captain and host will share some fascinating stories of the history of Sydney as we sail around. So it'll be a delightful way to reflect on all the memories that we've had during the past 3 weeks traveling through Australia. We'll have a farewell drink to toast our experiences, and as the sun is setting, a wonderful barbecue dinner, which will conclude our adventure officially. There's one more free day before our trip concludes. We organize it this way because some members who are ending their trip here will have early morning flights out the following day. And there'll be still lots of things that you might want to explore in Sydney. For example, if you're interested in art and culture, the Art Gallery of New South Wales or the Museum of Contemporary Arts are amazing places to explore both Australian and international art. They have some great indigenous exhibits, as well as some bold contemporary art installations. It's really quite a fascinating place to visit. If you didn't already organize that, you may want to actually take a show at the Sydney Opera House. In fact, we encourage members to take a look at the schedule in advance of their trip and plan if they want to participate in one of the shows that's going on while we're there. It's really a unique experience to take in something at this iconic spot. Brunch is an important thing for Sydney siders, so you might want to do that instead. There's a place called the Grounds of Alexandria or Bills up in the Surrey Hills, which have some of the best and most famous Aussie brunches in the city. But you could also take a ferry ride, go on a little coastal walk, or if you're really adventurous, you could try surfing, which is something that many Sydney siders have as their pastime. So those heading home will bid farewell to each other the following morning, head to the airport for our onward flights. But of course, there's always our post-trip extension up to the northern part of the country. Our post trip to Port Douglas is the perfect way to explore Australia's tropical paradise. It's in the far north of Queensland, and it's a gateway to the Great Barrier Reef and the Daintree Rainforest, which are two of the world's truly most extraordinary natural wonders. You'll have the chance to snorkel in and around the coral gardens of the Great Barrier Reef, as well as immersing yourself in an ancient rainforest. So those opting for our extension program will have a little breakfast in Sydney before heading the airport and flying all the way up to Cairns, where we'll be transferred to the town of Port Douglas. This was once a small fishing village, but it has since transformed into a very popular tourist destination, partly because of its tropical climate, but perhaps more importantly because of its proximity to the Great Barrier Reef as well as the Daintree Rainforest. The town itself, it's pretty laid back. There's boutique shops, there's a bunch of dining options, and actually a very vibrant art scene. So it's a great base for which to explore two of the most important natural wonders in the country. Once we get in, we'll have lunch at leisure and we'll have time to explore the town. And then we'll get together again for dinner to learn about our activities for the next couple of days. Today's the big day where we'll head out to the world famous Great Barrier Reef. We'll head out for a full day, starting with a catamaran ride that will take us out to Agincourt Reef, which is at the outer edge of the overall Great Barrier Reef. The area is known for its so-called ribbon reefs, which are some of the most untouched and pristine ecosystems in the world. The waters here offer incredible underwater visibility, which fosters some great and vibrant coral growth, as well as an abundance of marine life. The Agincourt Reef is actually part of a system that stretches over 2,300 kilometers, and it contains a vast range of marine species, schools of fish, sea turtles, and of course, the famous coral gardens. Once we arrive, we'll be at a floating platform, which has an underwater observatory where you can get an up close view of the reef's underwater wonders. And you have the option to explore the reef in a semi submersible, which cruises just above the corals and gives you quite a unique perspective of the marine life below. We'll then have a big hot and cold smorgasbord lunch, which will give us time to relax and enjoy the incredible surroundings of being in this place. And then there's some other activities that one can undertake in. They do come at a nominal extra cost. For those that have always wanted to dive, if you are a diver already, a certified diver, you can go scuba diving and do a 40-minute dive at the edge of the continental shelf, where the visibility of the water is perhaps the best you may have ever seen. Um, for those who are not divers per se, you can do what they call helmet diving, where you walk 4.5 meters underwater without needing any training. There's a special helmet that you breathe through, and you'll be able to get an up close view of the reef and the fish, just like you would as if you were a certified diver. There's, of course, also a guided snorkel tour, a 45-minute tour with a marine biologist who will give you some insight into the reef's unique bommies and coral gardens. There'll be a full day out there to explore the reef. This again will be certainly a day to remember. We'll return back in the hotel, leaving dinner at leisure. By that time, you'll probably completely exhausted. But there's of course the opportunity to explore a little bit more of town. After all that adventure, you'll have a free day where you can undertake a number of activities at your own pace. That being said, there's so much to see and do here that you may not want to waste a moment of time. So you could, for example, go out to the Mossman Gorge, which gives you an immersive experience in the Daintree rainforest, and do a circuit walk, which takes you through the lush part of the rainforest and introduces you to some crystal clear water holes. There's a Dreamtime walk with indigenous guides where you'll learn about the Kuku Yalani culture and how they make use of the native plants. You could also just take a stroll down 4 Mile Beach. It's only a short walk from the town center, and it has beautiful golden sands and stunning views of the sea. You'll see all kinds of shell patterns as they move along the beach. You'll see the islands out on the distant horizon and just enjoy the breeze. Uh, Australia is known, of course, for its more dangerous marine life, but in certain seasons where the jellyfish can come in, they do have stinger nets, so you can be able to swim there safely. You may also want to do a wildlife habitat experience to see various environments from rainforest to wetlands. Here you can see kangaroos, cassowaries, as well as tree kangaroos. If you didn't already know that was a thing. And of course, if it's a Sunday, you'll have a chance to visit the Port Douglas Market at Anzac Park, which has a vast array of various crafts, produce, and a number of artisans with their wares on display. On this day, we'll have our included tour out to Daintree as well as Cape Tribulation. The Daintree rainforest is one of the oldest rainforests in the world, over 135 million years old, and its age has given us an exceptional array of biodiversity, including some very rare and primitive plant species. We'll first of all stop at the Daintree River, where we'll have some morning tea and biscuits, and then we'll hop on a guided river cruise. Drifting along the river, we'll have a chance to learn about the estuarine crocodiles, the mangrove forests, and the endemic wildlife that lives in this very unique environment. We'll then head up the Alexandra Range, where we'll have a beautiful view of the World Heritage Wet Tropics and the tropical rainforest itself. You'll see from here the beautiful azure colors of the coral sea. We'll then walk along one of the national park boardwalks, where our guide will help us to interpret some of the flora and fauna while we look for the southern cassowary and other rare wildlife. We'll have lunch at a little cafe in the rainforest, and then later in the afternoon, we'll make our way for a four-wheel drive adventure through the Bloomfield track over to Emigan Creek, where we'll have a swim in the crystal clear waters, far from any other tourists or from any crowds, as it were. We'll then head for our last stop to Cape Tribulation Beach, just as most of the visitors are leaving, latter part of the day, and this will give us a chance for a peaceful stroll along the beach and the boardwalk, which will end at the photographer's platform that overlooks the mountains and the coastline where the rainforest meets the reef. Stopping off for a little ice cream at the Daintree Ice Cream Company will be a perfect way to end our adventure with a signature ice cream cup. And after all that, it'll be time to bid farewell to Australia. We'll head back to the airport at Cairns, and from there, make our trip back home via a number of different routes that we'll be happy to give you some guidance on. Hopefully, this webinar has given you a little bit of insight as to what you can expect from this 3-week live-away plus post-trip up to Port Douglas and the Great Barrier Reef. Of course, there's lots more information available, and the best way to get that is by visiting our webpage. You'll find the link to our Australia Live-Away webpage in the description just below this video on YouTube. On that webpage, you can also download our detailed trip itinerary. This is a full color digital brochure, if you will, that goes through each of the days as I've explained here with even more detail. And finally, we also have our trip specific reference guide, which is kind of like the FAQ, the logistics information that you might need to know when considering a trip to Australia. Beyond all that, if you're still not sure if this trip is right for you, then the best way to find out is scheduling a call with our trip specialist, Paula. She is an Australia expert, actually, and be more than happy to answer your questions that you have about this trip or any of the details we've talked about. And you can reach Paula by dropping an email to the address shown here. I hope you've enjoyed my webinar presentation today and that you've learned a little bit something about Australia and everything that we have in store for you. If you like our trip webinars like this one, then you are welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button that, again, you'll find just below this video. And then every time we post a new webinar about one of our trips or about other general interest topics that we have from time to time, then you'll be notified when that video is posted. I hope you'll consider joining us on this or any one of our future trips, or that you'll perhaps come out to meet us at one of our social events. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in, and happy travels.